This is the first video I have done in quite some time. It's been over a year since I have done a video on YouTube, and I have decided to maybe get back into it. And to be honest, I was a little bit frustrated with my prior offerings. I do have a few subscribers, mostly from just one video that I did. I believe most of them came from my Keystone XL video. And interestingly enough, I'm doing this video on a similar topic, which is basically oil. And so I wanted to do this video because I think what's going on is extremely interesting. And I don't know if people really are entirely aware of what's going on. So I'll just start by saying that about a month ago, the gas prices started to dip a little bit. Now, if you'll look at this chart that I'm showing right now, which is a historical chart of gas prices over the past 5 years, you'll see that this happens every single year. The gas prices dip a little bit in the November months. And this is to be expected. What normally happens, though, is that this is because oil, the price of oil falls. What normally happens, though, is when the oil price falls at this time period, typically the Saudis will cut their oil production back, and that drives the price back up. However, this didn't happen this time, and the press and people looking at this were trying to figure it out. So I was in my car about a month ago or so and was listening to NPR talk about this, and they were talking, in a way. This was before the recent events have occurred, but they were talking in a way that was trying to sort of figure out the reason why the Saudis were behaving this way. And there were 3 hypotheses that they discussed. And interestingly, before they even started in on talking about these ideas of, maybe what's going on, I already had a pretty good idea in my mind. And one of theirs was, I can't remember all 3. I can only remember 2 of them. The first one was that it was the U.S. conspiring with the Saudis and OPEC to keep production where it is so as to put pressure on Iraq and Russia in their geopolitical sort of situation, and trying to get leverage against them in nuclear talks and things like that, because they need certain price points to have their economies work, certain price points for oil. Now, the other one was the one that I thought of right away and what I thought was going on, and that was the Saudis are wanting to get their market share back up, and they continue to see their market share decline as a result of the unconventional sources of oil coming from primarily the United States. And so they're keeping production up, or they're keeping it where it is in an effort to strangle the investment of the primarily the hydraulic fracturing and these types of techniques that are used to get the tight oil. That's what has been the primary reason for the uptick in U.S. oil production. Now, of course, as I've discussed on this channel before, if you've watched my prior videos on these types of issues, you probably heard me talk about this, that these new, well, they're not really new techniques, but their newly used techniques require a high price point, and they simply cannot profit at these lower prices of oil. $75 is not going to get it done. And from my understanding, from what I've gathered, and I don't have a lot of strong information about this as of yet, but they're already struggling to really make a profit with this stuff. It turns out it's just even more expensive than expected. And this kind of thing takes, of course, years and years and years to play out. But I think they're now starting to realize how expensive this stuff is to get, and what all it entails. And so this actually might work. But yes, I believe this is what is going on, or I did believe that was going on. But now that has virtually been confirmed. And if you look at they recently had a meeting, and all the reports are coming out, and everything they're saying pretty much aligns with this. This is from Bloomberg, and this is just quoting an expert analyst in London. So he says that the Saudis' paradigm shift clearly shows their frustration with increasing supplies globally, OPEC and non-OPEC both. And he also says Saudi is testing the water here with unconventional non-OPEC producers. And then here's from Reuters, where they're giving information based on directly from the source. So they have this paragraph in one of their reports. 3 OPEC delegates had previously told Reuters that OPEC is unlikely to cut its oil output ceiling at the meeting, citing high supplies from some members and non-OPEC producers. So, and if you read through a lot of the reports and everything that are coming out, it seems pretty clear that yes, they are trying to get market share. So essentially, they're in a price war. We're in a price war right now, and that is good for the American consumer in particular in the short term. However, this could be bad in the long term for not only the American consumer, but for the entire world. If the Saudis are capable of I'm saying the Saudis, it's OPEC, but primarily the Saudis, if they are capable of riding this out and dealing with these lower prices, they require, a high price point too to meet the demands of their nation, and how they're sort of more or less subsidizing segments of their population. Now, if you'll recall, the Arab Spring led the Saudis to increase their social spending, basically paying off the public not to riot, because what really started in case you're not aware, what really started the Arab Spring was a lack of resources, basically, and in particular wheat, and food prices had dramatically increased. So the whole thing started with a protest about that, and a guy set himself on fire, and that started the whole thing. So this was about basically resources being squeezed, and primarily in food. And so when people are hungry and they can't afford to buy any food, things get bad. So anyway, the Saudis now need this higher price point because of this. So they're essentially paying off their population in large proportion. But they're going to try to ride it out, apparently. And if they ride it out and they are successful in doing away with, or they squeeze investors out on non-conventional sources, and particularly the frackers, as they call them, if they're able to do this, then what's going to happen in the future is that they'll have even more control, and you'll probably see very, very high uptick in oil prices, because if you just take that oil off the market that the U.S. is providing through these unconventional means, it's going to have an effect. It's there, these unconventional sources right now, and fracking is not the only one, but these unconventional sources are very important in sort of propping us up in terms of oil production, because despite the fact that we still have, the Saudis are still a major producer and are producing the good stuff more, as, a plurality of what they're producing. They're producing the nice oil. Despite that, most major oil fields from conventional oil fields are in a state of decline. And so it's important that we have these unconventional sources to kind of keep things level. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens if they are successful in getting back the market share that they've lost. And, the U.S. is a big part of that, because the U.S. has cut back on its imports due to the fact that we can produce more oil at these higher price points. But once you've squeezed them like that, you're going to affect how much you're going to produce, because the investors aren't going to be there as much. I think I think even without this situation, it's probably kind of short-lived, because there's only so much. I think there's a limit on how much you can do this in one nation. You're going to eventually run up against, this stuff requires a lot of water, and you're going to run up in against things like that, where where are we going to get the water from? Let's get the water from here, and then the citizens say, well, hey, wait a minute, we need that water, and the then they'll get into confrontations with the agricultural industry and things like that. So you're gonna run up, and they've already kind of run up into these things in Colorado and places like that. You're going to run up into this problem, and you can't just solve all of these barriers by having play within the government. You just can't. It's not always going to work, because eventually you're going to have competing forces that are going to have just as much influence and play as the oil companies. As hard as that is to believe, it is true. The whole thing is very interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And let's not forget the Keystone XL and all this. And I'm kind of curious to see how long this goes on, if there's going to be the same push to build it. Because now, well, gee, oil prices have really dropped. So maybe we want to kind of slow this down a little bit. Because, of course, the point of the whole thing is to get the oil, to get the tar sands or the oil sands or whatever you want to call them to the Gulf Coast, so that they can have the ability to ship it out. And that means they can get a higher price point for it. The international price point, which is not what they're getting in the interior of the United States, which is where they're primarily piping it right now. So we'll see what happens with that. Also, it's going to be interesting. Obviously that I don't think that requires the same price point as the tight oil, but the tar sands still require a high price point for their production to be profitable. So I think that pretty much covers what I wanted to talk about, and I hope you enjoyed this video if you're listening. And I want to thank you very much. If you like what I'm doing here, please subscribe to my channel. And you know, the more I've been getting more subscriptions lately, so it kind of made me think, well, let's maybe start making videos again. I actually have a video that I'm working on that's more production than this one, so I'm gonna try to get that out in a couple of weeks. And I appreciate, you know, the subscribers I have now. Thank you very much. And please, if you're watching this video, please like and share it, and let's get the word out, and hopefully we can have an effect. All right, thank you very much.